If I'm going to be cooking something that makes a lot of grease, like chicken or meatloaf or smoking up some bacon, what I'll do is I'll put some foil down. I'll just make a lip up along where it butts up against the charcoal, press it up against the side of the grill real well so the grease don't run down in between, and makes clean up real easy the next day. You just pick that up and throw it away. I'm going to be doing some burgers or dogs or sausage, something like that. I don't bother. Then to clean out the ash and clean the bowl, I utilize these two tools here. This here is an old paint roller handle and an old 4-inch paintbrush. I like using this because it's rounded. There's no sharp edges or corners on it to gouge into the finish of the bowl so it starts rusting. So all I do is if I have any grease laying in here, I'll just take this and knock some ash around, and that grease will soak a little bit up. It'll make it a little tacky and gooey, and it makes it easy to shove it down in. And I'll just take this and knock the rest of the ash down, run the sweep back and forth a few times, and I just scrub any buildup off with this. Move the paddles around, get underneath the paddles, try and keep it clean underneath the paddles so the paddles continue to work nice and slick. And I pay attention up along the edges, get the edges well, and then I'll take my brush and I'll brush all that dust down in. You see how there's no dust laying in there. This is nice and clean. I don't like that dust being in there when I start a new cook. When I come out to start a cook, I want that this kettle to be nice and clean. And for my ash disposal, so I don't have no gooey mess in there, when you get the charcoal dust and the grease mixes in with there, it makes a heck of a mess to have to clean out. Instead of messing with that goo, I just line my pan with aluminum foil. I take that whole thing and dump it in the ash can, and I'm done. Now what I do to keep the grease from building up and getting hard is each cook, I'll start off I'll put the coal in a different area of the grill. So in other words, if I cook out tonight and coal's over here, food's over here, you get that grease run down in here. Then the next cook, I'll put the charcoal over here, and that'll burn off any of that grease. And if you alternate that around there, that'll help keep anything from building up along the sides and along the edges. That'll keep all that build up to a minimum. This thing has well over 200 cooks on it, and there's very little buildup in there because staggering where I start the cooks off each time. To keep my grates clean, I utilize two different brushes. One's an after the cook brush, and one's a before the cook brush. A dirty brush and a clean brush. So after a cook, I'll open up both ends and get the grill as hot as I can get it with the amount of coal that's left. And I'll use this brush here to clean it up, scrub it down well. And the reason I use two different brushes is after the cook you have that grease and some food still laying on there. That stuff all stays on one brush, so if it starts getting gunked up and greasy, it stays on this brush. Then before the cook, I'll fire the grill up, and once it's good and hot, then I'll take it and I'll scrape it down good with this brush here. And then I'll get any remaining stuff off, and then I'll rub it down well with a wet paper towel. And if you do that, you'd be surprised how much grease you get off it. If you never scrub down your grill with a wet paper towel when the grates are hot, you'd be surprised how much grease you get off that. I snapped a picture of when I cleaned this last time, show you how much grease is on my paper towel. So that's probably what will be on yours. I like to get that stuff off because that's old grease, and if you're sitting there for a while, especially over the summer when it's hot and the lid's on there and it's sitting in there, and that grease just could be laying in there for a couple of weeks till you get around to barbecuing again. And I just don't like putting fresh food on a grill with old grease. But that's just me. If you're going to wipe your grate down with a wet cloth, do not do it after a cook. Do it before a cook. If you do it after a cook, you want to wipe that grease off. And if that thing sits for a while, that grate will start to rust on you. You want to let the grease on because the grease prevents rust. So always do it while the grate's hot before a cook. To be careful you don't burn yourself, what I do is if the coal's sitting over on this side, I just take my tool here, hook underneath here, and I'll just take this thing, I'll give it a 180. So it's over here, and I can wipe it down. You don't got to worry about singeing the hair off your arm and burning your hands. To help keep the grease from building up along the edges of your grate, if you take notice here where the flip grate is, there's hardly any build up along the edge of the grate. If you look over here, you can see how there's build up there, and over on this side also. And what that comes from is, I think most people, when they start a fire, it's out of habit, whether they have to add wood or coal or not, is they'll put the fire underneath where the flip grate is. And what ends up happening is there's not enough heat along the edges, and you start getting that grease, that buildup over there. So what I started doing, and it's made a difference already, and I just started doing it not too long ago, is if I don't have to add any wood or coal, I'll put my charcoal underneath the side, and that'll burn keep that stuff burned off. So if you have a new grill and you want to keep it looking good and keep it clean, give this a try. It should keep that stuff burned off for you. Now if you start to get them, I call them grease or goose stalactites that hang down from underneath your grate. To get rid of those, what I do is I flip the grate upside down, and here I turn this upside down so you can see, but I really don't have anything here because I just cleaned it the other day. If you start getting that buildup on there, I turn this grate upside down before I cook, go over it with a brush and knock all that stuff off. And if you position it that your flip grate's sitting on one of the tabs here, that'll keep the flip grate open for you so you can clean the whole thing. And what I do to get the buildup off from underneath my lid is I utilize these few tools here: a paintbrush, an old soup spoon, and some balled up foil. I like using this soup spoon because it's rounded, and those sharp edges or corners will gouge into your finish on the lid, and then you start getting rust. So what I do is I just, once the flakes start coming off, I just go knock them all off with this. And I don't have any here because I just did this the other day, but go around and knock them all over this thing here, go around the rim and get that well. And then I'll take my brush and I'll brush it all down into one area, and then dump that into my ash pan, and I'll go over it with the foil, and the whole thing. Then you'll see that you get some more off. I get around the edges also, and I'll take and I'll ball this up a little bit here, and I'll go in here and get underneath the vents. And if you move the vent back and forth, you'll see there's more buildup underneath you can't see. If you knock all that stuff off, that'll keep your vent moving nice and easy for you. And don't forget to get the probe for your thermometer. That way you'll get a nice true reading from your thermometer. And I'll take all that buildup, or the dust that's left, brush that down into an area, dump that out. Then I'll go over the whole thing with a damp cloth or a damp paper towel and get any remaining dust out. And that's how I take care of the buildup inside my lid. And what I do for the outside of my lid is, once I fire up the grill for a cook, as soon as I put the lid on it, I'll take a wet cloth or a wet paper towel, and I'll go over the lid while it's warm. You just gotta be careful you don't burn yourself. Kind of move the lid around a little bit away from the heat. But that lid will get warm, and then that'll help cut through the grease and you wipe most of the grease off, and that does a pretty good job. If you start getting some buildup on there, you can try 409 degreaser like that. And if that's not doing the trick, then what you can do is, if you're pretty fussy, you want to keep it nice and shiny, Mr. Clean Magic Eraser. Now right here's an area I did with the Magic Eraser. I don't know how well you can tell, but that shined that up pretty nice there. And over here's an area that I already cleaned, but there's still buildup on it. So that's the difference that Magic Eraser will make. That's all I do for the lid. The bottom I really don't do anything with. I very rarely wipe that down. That doesn't get much buildup. If you need to pick yourself up a grill cover, what I use is one of these inexpensive Weber grill covers. This thing was less than 10 bucks. Now these don't come with tie downs. So what I do to keep it on is I just use a clamp. Put a clamp on each handle. That holds it good and secure. I get some high winds out here. I'm up on a hill, and that thing's never blown off. So it does the job, and it's inexpensive. Now here's a wintertime barbecuing tip for cleanup. If you're cooking out and it's freezing, especially well below freezing, at the end of the cook that night, what I do is I run my sweep back and forth about 20 times, get that nice and loose. Matter of fact, I do that after every cook. But when you're done with the cook, leave those vents open. If you don't leave those vents open, they might, or mine freeze in place. And if you have that closed, it'll freeze closed, and you won't be able to get your coal out, or you won't be able to use your ash sweep. Then you'll have to scoop it out. If over the winter months you find that your ash sweep's getting hard to work, what's happening is you probably have grease underneath the paddles, and when it's cold out, you know what happens to grease to make everything stiff and hard to work. So if you try cleaning that out and that doesn't take care of the problem, what I do is I'll take a full chimney load of hot coal, and I'll dump it right over top of the vents, throw the lid on, and then open up top and bottom vents. I'll come out every now and then run the sweep back and forth, and that usually takes care of the problem. If you're doing a lot of low temperature cooks, this is when that happens. High temperature cooks, that stuff melts out for you. But if you're having trouble with that, give that a try, and hopefully it'll work for you, and you'll be good to go till spring. And here's another tip. You notice that your grill brushes, they always get a lot of grease built up on the tips. And what I do is I always buy these heavy metal ones, so I can clean them out. What I do is I just put a charcoal basket down in there full of hot coals. I set that in there, and that burns that all out of there. You just got to be careful you don't melt your handle. Now that'll take the temper out of the bristles a little bit, but it'll still give you another couple of uses. Now I already did this one once. You can see it's getting a little rusted. It's time to do this again, but that's how I clean the grease out of those things. If you notice that my thermometer is sitting on an odd spot in this lid and you're curious about that, that's because this grill did not come with a thermometer. That's an aftermarket brand I picked up and installed myself. It's a Char Broil brand. It was under $10. I checked it against my oven thermometer. It's within 5 degrees, so I'm happy with that. The reason I installed it where I did is because most of my cooks are indirect cooks, which means my hot coals on that side of the grill and my food's underneath or on this side of the grill. Whenever you're doing an indirect cook, you always have your vent above the meat. Now, if you got into a Weber grill, and I have no idea why they would do this, but they place their thermometer opposite the vent. So all that's telling you during an indirect cook is how hot that kettle is on the opposite side of the food, and it's sitting above them hot coals. So you'll find if you put another thermometer in next to your food, that there's going to be a temperature difference of 100 plus degrees depending on how hot your fire is. So you might want to consider getting an aftermarket brand thermometer so you know what the temperature is when you're doing indirect cooks. You can either get one of these dial type thermometers, or you can get a digital thermometer with a probe that you just lay on the grate. Now, a man left a comment on one of my videos after he noticed that I had an aftermarket brand, and he said he installed a Tel-Tru thermometer on his, and he's happy with that. So I'm going to post the name of that in the description area underneath the video in case you want to check those out. Now, here's a food safety or food sanitation tip. This is something I think most people are unaware of and never even think about, is cross-contaminating your food while you're grilling. What I mean by that is, say you throw some burgers on here, and you take your spatula and you're flipping them and you're pressing them down. Well, when you put that meat on there, that meat's raw. And if that's been tainted with anything, E. coli or anything, when you're touching that raw meat, that gets onto your spatula, and that stays there. So you cook your burger, and then you take that off, and you put it on your bun. Anything that was on the spatula, if it was tainted at all, is now right back on that piece of meat. So what I do is I use 2 spatulas, one on, one off. When I'm done doing the flipping and pressing for the last time, when it's time to pull it off, then I'll use a different spatula. If I don't have a second spatula, then I'll either go in and set it in bleach water for a while and wash it, or I'll just take this spatula and put it down into the hot coals and let that burn off and sanitize it. And the same goes with your tongs. If you have chicken and that's tainted with E. coli or salmonella or anything like that, and this is something I know about as I was in the restaurant business for years, so I know all about cross-contamination. So I'll do the same thing with tongs. If the chicken goes on, I'll use one set on and flipping it back and forth, and when it's time to pull it off, I'll either put these in bleach water, or I'll just use another set to pull them off. That way you don't cross-contaminate your food and nobody gets sick.